I used to think more gear made me a better street photographer, but it only overcomplicated everything. Too many choices, too many decisions. So I removed the gear most street photographers think they need every day. Now my setup is stripped down, no heavy bags, no decision fatigue. Because street photography is about seeing, not only carrying gear. And I cut out the gear you probably wouldn't expect. Let's get into it. I just quickly want to introduce myself. My name is Ambreen, and this is 28mm Street. I'm a self-taught street photographer, and I've been doing street photography for over a decade. Check out my website where you can sign up for my newsletter or read my free street photography blog. And always remember to check your spam filter after signing up. I also have street photography courses and other resources for you to explore. Now, let's get back to the video. I started doing street photography back in 2016, and a lot has happened since then. I've had a lot of cameras that I could rotate over the years. I accumulated a gold standard street kit with everything I could ever need as a self-taught or hobby street photographer for every situation I could think of. But now for a few years, I've subconsciously been removing a lot of gear that I don't need every day when I go out and do street photography. And this is because I've evolved and grown as a street photographer, and I also evolved my street photography style. So earlier this year, I stated that this year is going to be less is more, and that is also in terms of gear. I've tried to stay true to that statement as much as possible. And now I have a very minimal setup that I've come to love that is also my EDC, so everyday carry. And surprisingly, I realized that 90% of the gear that I used to carry around, I hardly need anymore. So let's talk about the 5 things I removed to simplify my everyday street photography. Up first is multiple camera bodies. So as I mentioned before, I've always had multiple camera bodies. I think at the height of my street photography journey, I had 3 cameras that I could rotate and use for different purposes when I was doing street photography. But for the past 3, 4, maybe 5 years, I've only had 2 camera bodies that I've used as part of my workflow. So in the early years, it was my Sony a7C and I had my Fuji X100V. And later on, maybe 2 years ago, I switched that combo to being the Fuji X100V and the Leica M6. And recently, I made a video about it that I quit digital street photography after 10 years. And that was a decision that was a long time coming, but I felt like I was, as I explained in that video, you can go watch that video, that I felt distracted because I have different mediums I could choose from and it disturbed my workflow. I was always in 2 minds about it. So I decided that I wanted to sell my Fuji X100V just to simplify my workflow. It's been almost a half a year now since I decided to sell my digital camera. I only have my film camera, the Leica M6. Since then, I would say it has not been easy, that decision, but I'm sticking to it and I'll take all the challenges that comes with it because I was actually expecting there would be some challenges. But removing the digital backup option has been already proving to be a little bit difficult because there have been a few situations where I've been out where it has been increasingly difficult to use film in different situations. The speed and convenience of digital I really miss in those situations. But if I look at it from a different perspective, and that is that I wanted to commit to one workflow at a time, I think that makes sense still for me. I have to just work with the challenges that comes, and we're also going into fall and the winter season soon. So I think it's going to be a little bit of a difficult or interesting period for me being a film street photographer in those seasons. No, I haven't regretted selling my Fuji X100V. I miss it though because it was so easy and it was so much fun to use. The second thing I removed from my everyday street kit is carrying multiple or extra lenses with me. So I have a fairly large lens collection. I think I have 10 lenses, so 8 of them are for my mirrorless camera, the Sony a7C, and the rest is for my Leica M6. And my lens collection is ever growing. I've loved adding every lens to my lens collection because I've had so much fun using them and get to know the focal length and really deep dive into it over the past 10 years. I think every time I went out, especially in the early years, I felt what you call analysis paralysis, where you have a hard time making a decision because you have so many options. I would like to do 50mm street photography, but what if I brought my 35 because in case, or maybe I should bring my 85, and that what if added more lenses to my street kit and my bag. And often when I ended up going out, my bag was a lot heavier than I expected or anticipated. There was a lot of what ifs, so I started to gradually scale back bringing a lot of lenses. But I think it was, as I also mentioned on my channel before, it was that case of maybe a severe case of FOMO, so fear of missing out. What if I missed the shot? And also looking back, I would say my mindset has changed a lot since then. And now I'm more okay with missing a shot. I can always come back and maybe get a different shot, maybe not exactly the one because moments are fleeting. But since I bought my Fuji X100V back in 2023, it actually really changed my perspective and my mindset a lot, because that camera was a fixed focal length camera. It had a 35mm equivalent. It really forced me in a way I didn't anticipate. And I know that sounds strange, but when I bought it, I didn't really think about how difficult it would be for me to just stick to one focal length at a time. On top of that, I mentioned that before also, 35mm is not my favorite focal length, and I was now stuck with a 35mm focal length that I had to get to know all over again. So I quickly added a conversion lens, so I had a 28mm focal length, and as the story goes, I went down the rabbit hole and got obsessed with the 28. Having the Fuji X100V and only having one camera and one lens setup really changed the game for me when it comes to street photography, because now I see, and also back then I was learning, that there are so many possibilities of having one camera, one lens, because I felt like I got more creative. I was much more aware of how I could use my 35 or 28mm focal length to get the photographs that I wanted. The next thing I removed from my everyday street kit is camera bags, and I love camera bags. I have, I think, 4 or 5 different camera bags for different purposes and different sizes. For everyday street photography, I hardly use a bag anymore, or camera bag, because as I mentioned before, I used to go out and the bag was really heavy because I just stuffed it with accessories. So now I only use a camera bag when I go out and do B-roll or do something very specific where I need my filters, I need my tripod. I need different kind of items for my camera. But most days when I go out on a photo walk, I just have my camera. I have my Leica M6 on my shoulder. I have the Joe Greer strap on it, so it sits perfectly on my shoulder. To be honest, I don't feel the need to have a camera bag. What I use sometimes is because I often carry my camera also when I'm just going out to grocery shop or picking up some books from the library. I have a tote bag, and it's a very cheap one I got. You know, it's nothing special, but I come to love it. But also I only use it during the summertime because it doesn't protect from rain, or it doesn't have any kind of padding or anything else. So I just use it if in case I need to carry something else other than my camera. Earlier this year, I had a few business trips I had to go on, and I actually missed a smaller EDC camera bag. So I went to my favorite brand, which is Wandered, and I ended up buying a small camera bag. And it's perfect because you can just squeeze in an extra battery or a pen or maybe a notebook, and my Leica M6 fits perfectly into it. And that's the bag I used most often this year. Other than that, I have my Wandered Rogue 3-liter. I love that bag and I use it every time I have a need for it. I also have a bigger camera bag that I use occasionally, and that's the Wandered Provoke 21-liter. I bought it maybe 3-4 years ago, and I've used it 2 times. Earlier this year, I went for a trip where I could actually have my clothes and my camera gear. So for that purpose, it was great, but it was just a lot of money for something I use very, very little. Yeah, so the conclusion is that for my type of street photography, I hardly need a camera bag these days. The next category is other essentials or other support gears like tripods, filters, and leather straps. So as I mentioned before, I would carry a bag filled with different camera accessories, lenses. And back then I was doing a lot of night street photography, so I would have a couple of fast prime lenses. And I would also have my black mist filter because I was really into that cinematic, hazy, dreamy look of my photos. And that requires me to have different step-up rings, and I would have extra batteries. So the bag got more and more heavy. Since then, I scaled back a lot because I also changed my photography style quite significantly. I would say 98% of the time, I do day street photography now. If you go back to the Fuji X100V example, that camera was so handy and it was just packed with different features. So it had a built-in ND filter, it had different film simulations, it had a flash and all that. So when I got that camera, I started really to dial back on the accessories I would carry. I didn't have the same need to have a black mist filter or other because I could get the same look through my film simulations. One thing that has remained in my street kit, so to say, is different straps or hand grips. And I have a few of them collected over the years. And that's actually one of the things I don't think I would ever remove from my street kit, because I have expensive cameras and I don't want to drop them and, break my cameras. So for me, having a camera strap or hand grip, right now my setup is just very simple. I have a short strap from Clever Supply Co., as I mentioned before. It's perfect for the type of street photography and the ease of use that I have, because I can just carry my camera. A lot of different accessories I accumulated. They're all great, but I don't necessarily need them on every photo walk I go on. So that's the list of gear I removed to simplify my everyday street photography. And the accessories and gear that I mentioned is not useless at all. It just serves different and very specific purposes to do street photography. And I think it's when you grow and evolve as a street photographer, the longer you've done it, you start to develop different needs. And when I was learning street photography, I was very hungry to learn all the different and technical aspects of photography. And I think all the items that I mentioned, they're good to have the knowledge of how to use. And so for that, I would say, has it been worth the investment? Yeah, I would say somewhat yes. And if I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't have this big of a street kit. I would probably have the new minimal setup that I have now. But again, you don't know when you're starting out, and that was my journey. And hopefully it will inspire you to also look at your own journey. Let me know in the comments what kind of accessories you remove to simplify your street photography. All right, I'll see you in the next one.